I was having a discussion the other day about the benefits of having people in your life. People that can be a mirror, a sounding board, sometimes something a little bit more direct in terms of your self-honesty, showing you who you are, how you're living, what you're creating in your world, in your life, in your environment. And of course, there are benefits to having people in your life. There are benefits to having a partner. There are benefits to living with people who see the world in a similar way to you. There are lots of benefits. Of course, as with all things, it's not necessarily that black and white. So I thought that I would talk through a few different dimensions to consider, because we often tend to hyper-focus on one particular aspect and kind of phase out and blur out the rest. So yes, having people in your life, people who are going to say to you, hey, look at what you're doing, hey, check yourself, that's great. But bear in mind that everyone is walking their own process. So even if you have an agreement with someone that you'd like them to let you know when they see that you're doing something that they know you wouldn't be okay with if you were in a more stable frame of mind, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean that they always will. So it's important not to place that responsibility on someone else, because we, at the end of the day, are always responsible for ourselves. So yes, it's helpful, but at the end of the day, because everyone's working their own process, because they might be going through their own stuff, it's not something that you can place on someone else's shoulders. So it's not something that if they don't do it, don't go and blame them for not doing it, because maybe they had other stuff in their life going on. Maybe they were walking through their own particular challenges. And as we all know, when we're going through challenges, very often it creates very little space for anything else. Another aspect is, of course, that there's no one person who sees all things. So even if someone is really sharp, even if someone is really on point a lot of the time, it doesn't mean that they're going to see all relevant dimensions of a particular thing or about a point that you're facing in your life. So we have this tendency to elevate people and put them on pedestals, and that person always knows everything, and whatever they say is 100% true, no questions asked. That is a recipe for disappointment and for missing key points potentially. So as much as we may try to have a balanced approach to our lives and to how we see things, the reality is that we're going to miss things occasionally. And that's what's so great about having other people around, to have someone to kind of bounce potentialities, bounce ideas, bounce different lines of thought off of, to see what we're missing. So that is the approach that I like to take, where I flag myself if I'm putting someone on a pedestal, as in following what they say without question. And I also flag myself if I don't want anything, if I don't want any kind of feedback from anyone. So if I start shutting down and closing off, both of those extremes are going to be detrimental to growth, because on the one hand, you're denying the potentiality of seeing something different outside of your own little box. And on the other hand, if you hyper-focus on one particular person and idolize that one person, you're going to, again, block out other things that may very well be relevant. So the main point with that is that, again, there's no one person who knows everything about everything. So a great principle to practice here is investigate all things and keep what's good. Keep what's relevant, and maybe something that's relevant now won't be in the future, and maybe something that's not relevant now may be in the future. There's nothing set in stone. I think there's a lot of flexibility that that we can allow for in our lives that are beneficial to our own growth and to our contribution to the world. And on the other side of the spectrum, we don't always have the option to be around people who are, for example, on the same mission as us. Sometimes, for a variety of reasons, we may be in a relatively isolated kind of lifestyle, whether it's temporary or long-term, especially now with COVID, where in a lot of countries people are not allowed to travel and visit and all of these things. So yes, we have the internet, but the internet and communicating with people through the internet gives a very, very limited perspective. It does not give you the whole picture. So text, video, all of that stuff, it doesn't give you the whole picture. It doesn't give you the reality of of actually being around someone for a decent length of time. So while yes, it can be helpful, it's not necessarily a fantastic solution that's going to allow you to really get to know someone, really see into the nuances of their behavior and pick up on small misalignments that only come out at certain times. So bear that in mind. So we're not always in a place, in a position in our lives to be around a lot of people a lot of the time. I live in a very isolated area. There's a lot of physical distance between me and the people who I call my support network. So I can't practically see the people who, for me, are on the same mission that I'm on, which I've had to find different ways to support myself. So part of that has been developing a pretty strict and structured self-assessment process, where if I'm reading something or watching something or having a conversation with a person, whether it's in person or by text or whatever is happening around me or whatever I'm participating in, if any of that triggers me in a way where I start reacting emotionally, or I start judging someone, or I do anything that's triggered or caused by a particular energy moving within me, then I remind myself, okay, what is actually going on here? A question that I find quite useful is, especially when I'm judging someone else, I ask myself, okay, how do I live that particular point that that person's representing in my own life? And that's quite useful to see what kind of dynamics within me actually led to that judgment of the other person. And it's supportive for me to see myself in a different light. It's a challenge for me to look outside the box in relation to myself. It's a challenge for me to step outside of my standard definition of myself and my beliefs and my kind of my regular routine way of thinking and way of living. So I force myself to take a different perspective, to look at myself and my thoughts and my experiences and my behavior in a different way. And while it's not the same as having another person to share a different perspective with me, someone who may see things completely differently and may open things up for me to see in a completely different way, it is, in this particular situation that I'm in, it's the best that I can do for myself, and I make sure that I keep challenging myself to take different perspectives on myself and on other people and on the world and how things work. Right. If you have any particular questions or scenarios that you're finding challenging, or relationship dynamics in this particular context of trying to establish healthy relationships and agreements that are based on a structured and mutual support, let me know in the comments or direct message me if you like. Otherwise, thank you for watching.